Hello everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for attending our today webinar of the SAP Solution Manager 7.2 is live. Now what? My name is Stefan Streller. I'm responsible within IBIS for the business development. And a couple of months ago SAP released SAP Solution Manager 7.2 and there are not a lot of, I do not know exactly, I think there are some upgrades done over the last months. And I think not only SAP customers as well are expecting the upgrade to 7.2 till the end of the year because there is no more support. That's what SAP say regarding the support for 7.1. So before we start, and it's my pleasure to welcome Volker on the web session, who will show you and especially the content regarding the SAP Solution Manager 7.2 and what we can expect, and now what you can do, and what is inside, and maybe as well some bugs we also found over the last months. We checked all these new functionalities 7.2 is having on board. Before we start and go into the detail, some organizational hint, as you know, so this session will be recorded and you will get an information a couple of hours or days after the session with the link to the recorded session and additionally the slides we presented today. And feel free to send us or some questions by using the functionality of the webinar tool. Go to webinar and we will answer, especially Volker thinks so, all the question maybe during his presentation or maybe at the end of the session. So yes, just let's start regarding some information regarding just some technical, so please, yes, there's the pause. So okay, so we just try to start Volker's presentation, and hopefully, yes, regarding the intro and regarding the agenda. So we have some topics, especially Volker has defined some topics regarding why all the fuss about 7.2, the art of documenting will be chapter 3, and how to get there with a little effort will be chapter 4, and at the end, so we will have a short summary what you should have learned in the session. And starting, so yes, so we have a long-standing partnership together with SAP over the last 23 years with different cooperation projects, and especially there was one we started in the beginning of 2000 with the SAP Solution Manager, let's say the first steps of SAP Solution Manager. And so we had a lot of projects over the last year, not only in the area of SAP Solution Manager with creating documentation or blueprint, as well with comparison maybe of clients or compliance analysis we did for a lot of customers all over the world. You see, for example, on the next screen with different customers in all areas of the world, for example, with Rolls-Royce in the UK or with General Electric in India, and or Mondelez, for example, not mostly, but often with our partners like PwC, Hewlett-Packard, Enterprise, Atos, or last but not least, SAP himself. But that should be enough. Volker, I think it's up to you. Please start your presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan. So hello everybody. I hope you can understand me quite well because I caught a small cold in the last days, which is just typical for the German weather. But I hope it won't influence us.
Or maybe hay fever season is starting.
Yes, of course, but I hope not for me. So one of the things we get asked again and again, and especially we got asked again and again, was a couple of questions about what the new Solution Manager 7.2 will bring. And there were many expectations of our customers, are there standardized and harmonized global processes available, or are those processes depicted in the solution documentation in SAP Solution Manager, are those transparent, are those understandable? Do they follow a quite and clear goal for the functionality that is behind it, that comes afterwards, for example, like test management or like monitoring or what else? And so the big question at the end of the last year was, will Solution Manager 7.2 be able to deliver all those things which were expected by the customer? So this is more or less the fuss about 7.2. We got lots of expectations from the customer side and from the customer groups like ASAC or DSAG. And it was quite a question whether 7.2 could deliver this. And I'm quoting here a slide which is very prominent from of SAP themselves. And what you can see here is their approach to application lifecycle management using 7.2. So what is quite right here from the perspective of the functionality, you have lots of requirements you can build in your solution. The solution is there to grow, to enhance, to be innovated, whatever it is. If you call for the 4 value scenarios depicted here, able to do a real project management which is integrated into the accounting part, for example. You are able to do a proper deployment process. You can correct problems, whether they be technical or whether they are business-sided. And of course, you can handle all those services. So from the functionality, the 7.2 is delivering lots of functionality, especially those which were demanded in the prior version 7.1. Okay, but the biggest pain point, and I'm pretty sure you all know this biggest pain point too well, is there's only 1 year left to do the upgrade. And no matter how you call it, whether it is content activation or whatever, actually it's a migration, and this migration has to be conducted in a very short time frame till the end of 2017. And I've seen lots of discussions in Barcelona or even here in Würzburg at the Technology Day of DSAG at the beginning of this year, when it was asked whether this time frame could be expanded. But SAP is bound to this time frame and they won't expand it, not under any circumstances.
So what does it mean if I could not upgrade till the end of 2017 for the customers?
Well, luckily I'm not surprised by this question, and I've included another slide which is explaining it. So basically this is the detail of the pain, because this tells you what to expect if you are not upgrading within the time. That means there will be no support packages, no legal changes in the future for you. There will be only limited technology updates. There is no SLA for you. And when it comes to the maintenance, and there's no proper predefined solution for your problem, it will be charged based on time and material. And overall, these are points which really can hurt a customer, especially when he's in a productive environment. Okay, so apart from the biggest downside, which we just saw in the prior slide, of course there are some new developments, some innovations, which are really, really interesting for customers. And most of them are depicted here. Like, we have multi-level hierarchies, especially on the documentation side. There has been lots of development going on for the 7.2 system. And since I recall doing projects for documenting processes in SAP Solution Manager, We always heard the pain of only being able to depict processes in 3-level hierarchies. This has been blasted. We have another concept here. You can do hierarchies, process hierarchies of many levels, much more than 3. You are able to integrate a BPMN process editor. That means we are not only bound to have some hierarchies here to depict the processes, there's also some real process modeling available, which is functionally integrated into the process documentation. And we are following a fully new concept when it comes to the libraries. We will come to that very soon. An important part, an integral part of the understanding of 7.2 is, just like in the prior version, the solution documentation, which was called business blueprint before, it doesn't matter how you call it, it's still a process documentation, a tool of process management, and it's very important, it's crucial for doing all those integrated functions like requirements management, charm, test management, business process monitoring, and so on. Because all those integrated functions are only usable if you have a proper understanding of what's really going on in your system. And from the functional side, this relies heavily on having a proper process documentation, so that everyone involved understands what really the business processes are doing, and then how they are conducted step by step, using which programs. Yeah, talking about the library concept, which is a very fundamental part of the 7.2 architecture, means all technical objects are stored in special libraries, which are just there as references, like process steps, executables, interfaces, configurations, whatever. And when you're building up your processes in the solution documentation, you're just referring to the single elements out of those libraries. This is, of course, the main point here is to avoid redundant documentation. And this makes maintenance much easier for the future than it was before. If you recall all those all those older documentations of Solution Manager 7.1, where there were multiple solutions, projects, multiple assignments of the same executables, whatever, it was quite a mess. And this is something that is ruled out now, and using the library concept in a proper way, you are able to have those single elements stored individually, and it's just referred to build up proper processes.
Is this a new functionality, this interface, not the library, but the possibility of documenting such interfaces?
Not really. So you had some kind of interface documentation before as part of the business blueprinting, but this is something else, because you can define them in a specific library, and that means you can reuse them more easily than you could before.
Okay.
Okay, so much for the functionality of 7.2, and you will agree this sounds basically very promising, but there's one gap, and you mentioned in your beginning sentences what are the gaps of 7.2, and this is a major gap, because what about the content? That's still a big question mark, because you have all those functionalities, you have those libraries, and you can build up library content, for example, by using the scope and effort analyzer or whatnot, but still there's a big gap in the environment of the 7.2, and that is the real content for the processes. So if you want to build up end-to-end processes for the SAP Solution Manager 7.2, this is something that is not covered by SAP Solution Manager 7.2. Okay, so let's just take a look at the definition, what a solid solution documentation really is. So it's a documentation of all library and process elements, so of all content that is relevant for conducting your businesses. and it's open for integrated functions of the ALM environment. And this means by doing so, by forming this content, you will be able of forming a proper documentation of all your business processes. And typical questions out of customer projects we face are, for example, which steps make up such a process, such a given process? Which executables are assigned to a given process, and in which sequence are those conducted? What is happening there? What are the people doing there when they conduct those executables? Or how many users are really active in a given process? We have seen so many projects where we discussed single processes just without proper knowledge of who really is involved in doing those processes, or what documents are created conducting those processes, whatever. So these sample questions we have defined here are just a short example of the possible questions.
So I remember just these, you just have on the screen how many users are active in a given process. So that's what SAP is not allowed to deliver.
For example, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but even then there are differences. For example, bound to the given law of a country, we would be able to ask who the user really is, or just how many users there are, depending on whether we are allowed to scan this or not.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so the overall goal is to form a proper solution documentation that really represents a customer's process landscape, that really reflects what the customer is doing in his daily business. And there are so many influencing factors for those elements of a solution documentation, and I try to depict them here in this screen. And it's no coincidence that there are so many of them, because you have so many possibilities here. For example, if you take a look on the list of the left side, the company organization is having a heavy impact on how the processes are really conducted. There might be, for example, regional differences, or there might be different business procedures for different business units, or there could be custom-specific executables like set and Y transactions or programs. There might be some variants, especially when you're facing non-ERP systems like CRM systems, for example, when we are talking about web UIs. Or there might be some third-party solutions involved, some interfaces or whatever. On the right side, you can see so many things that are influencing the solution documentation, like the best practices, which are templates offered by SAP themselves. Or there's company know-how that has to come into the solution documentation because it reflects the experience of your employees. Or there is partner content that might add some bonus to your solution documentation. So there are so many things that might be added to build up a solution documentation, and I've tried to build up some big classes out of that. For example, the information that really counts when it comes up to building up a process hierarchy. For example, the overall usage, which is the topmost term, is something that is very important to see how many times processes are really conducted in a customer system, or how many users or roles are connected to it. Are there any exceptions in the process flow? Are there some integrations like interfaces, or some integrations to other processes? Is there differing configuration? So basically lots of determining factors, but there are three basic principles which really build up a solid process documentation. At first, it has to reflect customer processes as they are and as they are really conducted. So the second one is it shows the business as it really is, not as it should be, but as it really is conducted. And the third is it relies heavily on standard content and templates. This is something that is highly suggested because it's very important to stick somehow to the SAP standard when it comes to build up your processes.
So wait, to shows business as it really is, you just told us, but what about if there are changes during several months or years, for example?
Well, we will come to that.
Okay.
Something you have to keep in mind when building up content for the SAP Solution Manager solution documentation is not only that you have to implement it today, but to keep an eye on how it develops in the future. So you need to be open for maintenance because I've seen so many projects where people tried to get a high degree of individualized content. But as you need to maintain this in the future, it is very important to keep a track on that.
Right. So we just have a question. SAP typically presents that Solution Manager 7.2 offers an easy way to generate a business blueprint. What is the value add or the added value from IBIS?
Well, we will come to that in detail, at least if time allows me to do so. But basically, more or less, SAP relies on the transactional side of building up content, especially when it comes via the libraries. And there are so many different approaches here, but as a rule of thumb, it is heavily based on the transactional flow, on the programs executed and the transactions executed. But what can be done more, what has to be done if you want to build a real reflection of your business process is take a keen eye on the business documents, on the configurations, on the business processes, on the exceptions, on the master data involved. Because, for example, if you take one of the most used transactions in the SAP world, the VA01. The VA01 is one transaction, but you can use it in so many different ways that it basically could be assigned to over 50 different processes in the SAP world. And that means if you take the VA01, you're not really sure of which process variant really is used at a specific customer scenario. And this means you need additional information. And this is something you have to take out of the system because you want to know what a process is really doing.
And what about if you have different org units with different businesses? Is there a possibility to have much more than one blueprint, for example, or documentation?
Well, basically, it's only one solution that is available and that should be used because finally SAP demands the single source of truth in the 7.2 environment, and this is basically a good thing. But you can build up variants within this solution.
Okay.
And this is something you can easily do here. Yeah.
But you have to identify which businesses you have and whether it's in use or not and how often and something like that.
Yeah, it's just the same thing. You have a proper functionality waiting here for you, but basically it's an empty shell. So you need to add content, you need to identify the content because only if you are really sure what you're doing and what you're depicting here, then it really reflects your business. If you're not really able to identify that, then this might be some nice looking technical information, but it won't reflect your daily business. And especially if you want to combine the IT and the business units in some common documentation. And this is what the SAP Solution Manager really is meant for the real IT business alignment. Then it is a crucial point that knowledge from both sides go into the content. And this content needs to be built up by the identification of the business processes as they are, with all their exceptions and configuration details, and on the other side with the technical elements which are coming from the libraries.
Oh, great.
Okay, so the easiest way of thinking about what to do is just take old content or take existing process models. While I won't say that all of them are trash, but every existing content has the potential for trash. So it is very important to take a clear picture of what you really have on your desk in form of existing documentations, be them SAP provided templates or be them existing test cases from your company or whatever, and to really scan them in detail, whether there is some part which is just old or not used or not used anymore or whatever, or whether there are some gaps, because if you're not taking a clear look at what you already have on your desk and just pack that into the new system, you might suffer the garbage in, garbage out effect. And this is something you won't really want to face. Okay, just an example of how it is done correctly. It means on the underneath the term custom structure, you can see an example from one of our customers, which I have anonymized. And you can see here lots of entries. Actually, these are process steps. And honestly, this is only an excerpt from a single process. So it is just about 30% of the real process, and it was very confusing. So the first thing we did by getting the structure, the custom documentation from the left side to the right side was simplification. That means we looked at the standard process, at the standard template, what was available for this process, and we took a keen look on the different variants that have been ruled out here, and we have just aggregated them into the right side to get a clear picture of what really was happening on the business side.
Regarding the order, yes, which step is first or not? Is there
yeah, of course. It has to do with the sequence, okay, but it also has to do with the different variants, executable is involved, and how you depict those variants. So if you take a look on the left side, this was absolutely impossible to maintain in the future. Okay. And structures like this are usually growing over time, but there's nobody available which will edit those over the years, and that means they tend to be not used over the time. Okay, getting that into the Solution Manager was more easy by taking the simplified approach, by identifying the different process variants, by specifying the different requirements like regions, business units, org units, and so on, by analyzing the exceptions, analyzing the special objects like interfaces or whatever, and by taking the correct objects out of the libraries and adding them to the right side. So while this is a much more simplified approach, it is also something you can maintain for the future. Yeah, but the base of that is having the right information. Without having the right information, you will be depicting something which might be nice looking, but which is not really depicting the business reality you're facing. So on the right side, you need lots of library content, library information. On the left side, you need much of the business information like documents, master data, org units, whatever, configurations, and the different roles and user authorizations.
So Volker, I just got another question.
Yep.
Is it really possible to create a process hierarchy with SAP Solution Manager 7.2, or is it merely populating the libraries from a technical point of view? So e.g. the customer is left with drawing, modeling his process flows.
Okay, so basically the standard tools of SAP are depicting, are just giving you the ability of creating library content. That's right so far. But you have the possibility of taking in some templates, like the best practices out of a given portal, which can be imported into your SAP Solution Manager 7.2. Give me a few minutes and I will show you what that really means using the templates, because this is on one side a very interesting approach. On the other side, this is something that might not be really getting you very far. So basically, when we are talking about building up a process model, we usually do it in 4 steps. The first is of extracting information from the attached systems. The second is of analyzing the data and configuring the different processes, doing some workshops with the customer to get the experience into the process content, and in the end of importing it into the 7.2 system.
So a couple of times, sorry, you mentioned the best practices from SAP, and there's another question. Are the best practices available for ECC 6.0 only for S/4HANA?
I see the colleague is urging us into the direction. This is why I swapped the slide and got to this one. Okay. So basically, it's heavily relying on HANA. It's exclusively for HANA. But when it comes for the content, this is a very good content. So what can you see here on this table? So I have done a comparison here for different process content, and in the middle row you can see, in the middle column you can see the best practice content, which is HANA based and which is dedicated for usage in Solution Manager 7.2. In the left column you can see a sample customer model we have seen with all the specifics and documentations already attached. And on the right side you can see something we call the RB Plus BPH repository, which is a template of our own, which is more or less evolved out of the BPR, which we developed over the years. And the main differences here are right to be seen in the first row, where you can see the number of process steps. So for example, when the real customer demand, the real customer requirement was for having 100, round about 100 process steps, the best practice content only supported 34. While the repository, the full repository that reflected all possibilities out of the SAP standard was about 178. What does that mean? It means when the customer needs around about 100 process steps, he won't get them by the best practice content, which is just like bodies for your business processes, because it's only a limited view on what is really possible in an SAP system. So when you're building up a new system, the best based solely on the best practice content, this is something you can live with because it really depicts your processes. But if you're differing from the best practice configuration, it means you have a high gap between what you really do and what is depicted here. And while the best practice content is filled with lots of configuration information and documentation and graphics and whatever, it still is very limited when it comes to really depicting what you are really using SAP-wise. Okay.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome. Okay, I see I'm taking a look at the clock. I have to come to an end, more or less. When we're talking about our very own approach, we're using at IBIS, we're using a tool which is called the Process Designer 2.0. And this is based upon our RB Plus analysis methodology. And what we're doing is, on one side, we are extracting the data out of the customer systems to see the real usage, to identify the real processes used by the customers. And on the other side, we are able to take in lots of additional information here, like information found at the SAP Service Marketplace, like the best practices, or like taking in existing 7.1 process models, or even taking in existing models based on old test cases, whatever. Because in all our prior projects, we found that there are so many different information available from the customer side, and you need to include them into your process model to be able to provide a full picture of what you're really doing. On the right side, before we're doing an import, this is heavily discussed with the customer, because the customer's direct experience has to be brought into doing such a process model, into doing such content for 7.2, because only if the customer's experience is brought into the content, it really is able to add something valuable for your ALM scenario. Okay. So let's summarize. What is a good and a solid solution documentation made up? It is comprehensive. That means it is not leaving any gaps. It reflects the reality and specifics of your processes and your configuration. It includes process relevant systems, no matter whether they are SAP or not. It is based on templates and standard content as far as it is possible. Of course, it's always, I've never met a single customer that relies to 100% on SAP knowledge. Most of the customers have a certain amount of processes that are highly individualized. And it focuses on the real usage and the real goals, the functionality goals, what you really want to do it, whether it is testing or whether it is charm or monitoring. It is understandable and transparent, and this is something which is very important, especially if you align business and IT, because both sides have to understand what you can see here. And one of the biggest points, and which is most often ignored, it needs to be maintainable for the future, and it needs to be open for changes, because you might be able to identify your today's business, but tomorrow's business is a totally different kind of thing. So this needs to be able to be drawn into, and you need to be able to modify your process model in the future. Okay.
Volker, thank you very much for this rough overview regarding the SAP Solution Manager is live now what? So feel free to send us more questions and we will answer it immediately. So there is another question from another colleague. SAP announced that RPBD was subserted by blueprint generation and there is no need for a rule database any longer. How can we keep our business processes up to date in Solman 7.2 if SAP doesn't offer reverse business process documentation, a rule database any longer? Oops, long question.
Okay, since you only can hear me and you can't see me, you can't see me smiling, because I know the promise from the SAP side that 7.2 is able to do everything that 7.1 could do. And that's just not the truth, because if you look at the SDA, the Solution Documentation Assistant, and the content for it, the RBPD, this was something which was highly advanced content, a content creating tool for your business blueprinting under 7.1, and it just fell out of 7.2. And this is a pity, because this was one of the things that was really able that were really able to close that content gap, to add content automatically into your solution manager. And many things would have been easier for the 7.2 migration if this would be still available.
What about migration scenarios, Volker? Are there differences? What about if I have let's say a blueprint in 7.1 Do I have to start on a flushing meadow or whatever? Is there migration?
Well, basically, we see two scenarios. The one is the brownfield approach of doing the migration. That means you have existing content and you are migrating the content alongside the tool from 7.1 to 7.2. And the other approach is the greenfield one, where you're creating everything fully anew. Okay, so basically, the brownfield content is something you can do, but it's a bit tricky in a productive environment, especially if you're facing a productive TAM scenario. Right. But even more so, it's very important to, like with all old content, like with all existing content, it's very important to identify whether it really reflects your daily business as is and not the business as it was. So it's very important to do a proper scan of that content as well before you're migrating it, else you're facing the garbage in, garbage out effect.
There's another question. Do we have some experiences? Yes, SAP positions content activation as an easy process to migrate from Solvent 7.1 to 7.2. What's others' experience, Volker? Do we have some experiences area?
We have some experiences here, and well, just like I said, if you have a productive environment, it's much more tricky than doing it on an environment that is not in a daily use scenario. So it is possible to conduct this migration, but be open for some unpleasant surprises. Those happen.
Okay, so we have another question. Can you refer a book or a source describing all functionalities of Solman in more detail? Oops, maybe there is a current book released.
Yes, of course. There's one from SAP Press.
Yes. Is it?
Perhaps we will include. I will search for the link and we will include it into the information we will send out.
From Matthias Mehlich and Mark Oliver Schäfer.
Yes,
so the current 7.2.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. So if there are no more questions, so I say thank you very much to you for all the attendees. Once again, the organizational hint, you will be informed, you will get an email with the link for the recorded session and especially the slides. And feel free if you have questions regarding your documentation requirements within SAP Solution Manager 7.2, maybe we can help, we can support you. So once again, thanks to all of you for listening our webinar and have a nice day. Many greetings from Germany to all over the world. Bye, you're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Volker, once again.